Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am delighted to have with me today a round two appearance. Psychologist Thais Gibson, PhD, was on episode 489 where we talked about reprogramming unsupportive coping mechanisms, learning to set healthy boundaries, and healing your old core wounds. Actually, since that time, I have gone through her course, which was so transformative and life-changing for me, which I'm sure we'll get onto as we're coming through. But in today's show, we're going to talk about how to leverage our subconscious mind to goal set and some of the blocks that can stop people achieving business goals, relationship goals, fitness goals, and everything in between. Thais, so excited to have you back on the podcast. Welcome on again.
I'm so excited to be here. We had such a fun time chatting the first time, and you had such thoughtful, insightful questions. I really enjoyed it. So, yeah, grateful to be back.
Me too. And this one, we're going to jump around a whole host of different topics. As I mentioned to you right before we went on air, I've done some prep, more so my own personal questions based on the audience that I know will be very curious to hear about, because I follow your content. I see your content. I've been through your course. I consumed, I think, for about a 6 or 7 month period, every single podcast you put out when I was working through my fearful avoidance. And again, I didn't even have the language around this. So we're not going to go too heavy into the attachment theory, particularly with my example here. Although if it naturally interweaves into the conversation, we can discuss it for sure. But I want to talk about the subconscious mind. This is an area that is front and center for you at the minute in terms of educating people when it comes to their blocks, the subconscious blocks that prevent them from following through with the life they want to live, the things they want to do. Can you give us a little bit of a grounding on how we can leverage our subconscious mind to goal set, which is very broad to start, but we can go niche and narrow down from there?
Yeah, great question. So, I think the first thing that people want to understand is that your conscious mind is only responsible for 3 to 5% of everything. So, people's conscious mind is like your logical thinking, analytical self, almost a part of yourself in a sense that you think of as your personality, the things that you're consciously aware that you're doing. Your subconscious and unconscious collectively are 95 to 97%. And so your subconscious mind's running the show. Like, the part of us that thinks that we're logical and analytical and, oh, we're going to make this decision. We're going to go to the gym every day, or we're going to quit eating chocolate, or we're going to, actually show up and start that business we've always wanted to, or we're going to change our relationship patterns. Those parts of ourselves where we tell ourselves those things and then we don't follow through. It's not because we're weak or we're not good enough or we're not capable. It's because we don't understand the mechanics of what's actually happening. And so we try to will our way towards our goals. But what's really interesting is your conscious mind cannot outwill or overpower your subconscious mind. It can only rewire and reprogram it. And so what essentially takes place is a lot of people go through life and they feel defeated because they think, okay, I tell myself I'm going to do something and I don't follow through. And then we judge ourselves about it. And the reality is that you're not following through because you just don't know how it works. And once we can understand how our subconscious mind really works and neuroplasticity, and I'm sure a lot of what we'll cover here today, we can actually rewire the blocks that are sitting there at a deeper level. And we can move into a space where we design our life to feel a lot more seamless, a lot less like we're carrying a boulder up a hill. And for anybody listening, if they've ever felt like they're, sort of driving their car and they're pushing the gas and feeling like the brakes are on at the same time, that's because your conscious and subconscious mind are usually working against each other. So we can definitely unpack today like where those subconscious blocks are and how to source them and how to actually rewire them so that you can achieve the things that you want for your life in a more purposeful and effortless way.
When it comes to reprogramming our subconscious mind, Thais, is awareness the first step towards change? Is, again, because I know when it comes to attachment theory, when it comes to different therapy modalities, generally awareness tends to be the first step towards change. Is that the same with reprogramming the conscious mind, or is there an alternative first step?
Definitely awareness.
Mhm.
So for sure, it's sourcing your blocks first, because if you don't know what those blocks are specifically, then it's really hard to move through them. It's almost like saying, if I don't know what my needs are in a relationship, I can't go communicate them to my husband, right? So if we get into a place where we don't know the blocks first, then we're going to get stuck. But I'm happy to even share a tool today at some point where we go through and help people find what their core blocks are on the way to achieving their goals. Because there's actually some questionnaires and some tools we can use to help them really source that clearly.
I'd love to focus on the removing blocks, because something that I've been doing for the last decade or so, which has led to a little bit of external success when it comes to fitness and entrepreneurship, etc., is understanding the reticular activation system, that the internal GPS in my brain, that it will focus on the thing I tell it to focus on. The example I would tell people is, if you've just bought a new car, you see that car everywhere on the street. Or if you have a pair of special, beautiful red shoes and you walk into a room with 100 other people and someone else has the same pair of shoes, it's the first thing you notice. Your brain is focusing on the thing that you're telling it to focus on. Something that I've been less schooled on, which is your area, is the blocks that prevent people from hitting that target. So I thought a misbelief I had was, okay, just set the goal and the reticular activation system will kick in and I will eventually hit that goal. What I didn't understand a decade ago, or even 5 or 6 years ago, was there's all these blocks that actually can stop me when it comes to relationship, when it comes to business, when it comes to fitness. The same as people listening will have their different ones that they're working towards. Talk to us a little bit about how we go, the starting point for understanding those blocks. So it's not enough just to know the target, know the end goal. You can't hit a target you can't see, etc. There's actually these figurative roadblocks all along the way. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love that question so much. So what you're speaking of is the RAS, or reticular activating system. What's so interesting, you'll love this, is that it doesn't just filter out. It's not like, okay, whatever you're focusing on, it filters out. It actually also filters out information according to your beliefs. So what's wild is that if you get into a situation where, like, let's say that you want to start a business, but you believe that you're always going to fail. When you go about trying to start, you can set the goal and be like, okay, I'm going to start this business. But then you always see, like, every little mistake you make, you hyper analyze it and magnify it because it's according to your belief system. So you'll be like, oh, look, I made a mistake. I knew I'm going to fail. I know I'm going to fail. Look, more proof I'm going to fail. And then we can actually work ourselves out of our goals because of the way that our RAS is attuning to our belief system first at a subconscious level.
Oh, that's happened to me. That has literally happened to me. I remember when I came across your work initially, it was through relationships, because that was the area of life that historically an old version of me struggled with more than other areas. I was good with fitness, I was good with finances, I was good with business. There were areas I didn't really have a lot of blocks in. All my blocks seemed to come in relationship. And it was all in romantic relationships, I mean, specifically. And something that, what I just in real time processed for those that are listening, which would be helpful because we all have our own version of this, is I knew what kind of partner I wanted, or I thought I knew what kind of relationship I wanted. Let me rephrase, what kind of relationship I wanted. Yet I would find that I would self-sabotage always along that journey, along that path, until more recently, when, again, coming through your course, and I'm again not underplaying how much that impacted me because of the fearful avoidant tendencies that I had that I wasn't aware of. I was aware of attachment theory and anxious avoidant and secure, but I didn't realize the different types of avoidant that was in there, which felt like you were speaking directly to me when I was coming through that course. For those that are listening who want to rewire that belief system, they want to reprogram that belief system so that they actually, I might be putting it the wrong way, but just get out of their own way, and then they're able to go towards the goal. What would be the process for that?
Okay, so I love this. So we'll start with the first thing. So the first thing is, to your point, pick an actual goal. So for any area of life, it could be to have healthier relationships, to settle down. It could be to have, a business, to make X amount of money, to achieve XYZ fitness goal. So it can be anything. But the first step is to be like, okay, what is my actual goal? And the first thing that helps us, and we'll do this sort of in stages. So you start with the vision of it. But the first thing is, in order for your subconscious mind to even pick it up, we have to understand that the conscious mind speaks in language. So the conscious mind hears like actual language, but your subconscious mind speaks in emotions and images. So if I say, whatever you do, do not think of the pink elephant, your conscious mind hears do not, but your subconscious probably flashes an image of a pink elephant. So we actually have to make the goal readable by our subconscious mind. And that starts with imagery and emotion. So you have to be able to, like, bring as many sense perceptions into the goal as possible. I always advise people, okay, write a paragraph out of like what it looks like when you achieve the goal, what it feels like when you achieve the goal, where you're standing, what version of yourself you become in order to achieve the goal. You want to get like as vivid as possible. So there's the most emotion in there and the most imagery in there. And I often tell people, hey, spend like 15-20 minutes just on that and get really clear, really feel about it, because now all of a sudden your conscious and subconscious are working together. Your conscious mind has an analysis of something that it wants, and now it's actually driving that information down at the subconscious level. Now, To your point, that's the first part, but then we can have all these blocks along the way. So the second thing, and this is a great source to pull up the limiting beliefs. The next thing is, once you're clear on what the goal is, the very first question I ask people is, okay, well, why haven't you achieved this yet? And what happens is that is a great way to pull up people's limiting beliefs. So then they go, oh, because I don't have enough time, or oh, because I'm not good at ABC, or because, when I make all this money, people will, I'll have more conflict. People will leave me or abandon me, and so what happens is, by asking that question, you start to be able to source out those limiting beliefs. Or another way of asking yourself is, okay, if I do achieve this goal, what am I afraid will then happen? Because there's something deep down that we're fearing. And some people give you these kind of like cliche answers. They say, you're afraid of success. You're afraid of, and it's like, well, sure. Like, but it's not really afraid of success. Nobody's afraid of success. It's afraid of the core beliefs that they have tied to success itself. And so what I would do here, and what I'll share with the audience, and I'll list some off, but there's some really common ones that are our core beliefs as people. And you probably know a whole bunch of them, but we have the obvious. We have like, I'm not good enough. We have, I'll be abandoned. I'll be alone. I'll be excluded or disliked. I'll be rejected. We have things like, I'm unworthy. So it's, essentially it's like, I'm undeserving of having that. We have, I am bad, a really common core belief for people that over explain themselves a lot. Like, no, I'm too, I'm a bad person. And usually just comes from like a whole bunch of punishment in childhood that's unnecessary. But then we have things like, I'll be trapped, I'll be helpless, I'll be powerless, I'll be betrayed, I'll be disrespected, unseen, unheard. Those tend to be some really major core beliefs that get in the way for people. And so by asking yourself that question, like, why haven't I achieved this yet? Or if I do, what am I afraid will happen? And then really tapping into like, oh, well, I'm afraid that in order to start this business, then, I'm going to be so busy all the time. I'm not going to have room for my friends and family. I'm going to end up being abandoned or alone. Like, you'll start to really see what those beliefs are for you individually. And so that's how we start sourcing those beliefs. And then we'll realize, like, okay, yeah, your conscious mind wants something, but usually people get the first step wrong, where their conscious mind wants something. They're only doing it in language. They're just thinking at a high level about it. So their subconscious isn't even picking up on it, can't even get on board with that 95% of you. But then on top of that, there's even these subconscious blocks, and they haven't even sourced what they are. So those are sort of our awareness steps. We want to drive the information to the subconscious level. And then we want to pull up, using those questions, making that subconscious information conscious. Like, what are those beliefs as a whole? And then we can get into the rewiring after.
Would you believe, before I set up my own business, I was working as 4 years as a primary school teacher. That was my quote unquote real job before I set up my own business. And one of the reasons that I hated my job. But the first job, I hated it. I liked working with kids, but all the paperwork, all the other stuff, I wasn't a fan of. And then it got to the point where it was okay, which is actually worse. It's the pain pleasure principle. Like, the yeah, okay syndrome's way worse, because you'll put up with, yeah, it's okay. You'll put up with a 5 out of 10. If you're a 1 out of 10 relationship, job, fitness, health, you tend to make a change because it's pushed you, you're in pain. But my story, my limiting belief, just came up in real time, which might be useful for people. Was fitness was my passion, and my story was, if I become a personal trainer or a coach, which was my journey 13 years ago, 14 years ago initially, and I make it my career, I won't have an outlet, and then it'll become something that I'm always doing, and then I'll hate it. And that was a period in my life when I had undiagnosed anxiety. I didn't realize I had anxiety. And what the underlying belief for me was that the gym is my tool for dealing with my mental health. If I turn it into a career and I lose that tool, I'm going to be anxious all the time. This was a story that I was living in subconsciously, and it stopped me. And actually, I went broke twice in my business. And looking back in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God, that was a subconscious belief that was there. And until I was able to bring awareness to that, I wasn't able to push through it. So it's as you're speaking in real time, I'm like, oh yeah, I 100% get that. For me, the awareness was the first step. Acceptance of what the situation was the next step. And then I had to pull from a bigger why, like the regret. So I used my 97-year-old rule of, like, what would I regret more on my 97-year-old deathbed? I'm like, I would massively regret not following this passion, this career, and seeing where it goes. At least I could always fall back and go to teaching if this didn't work out. What is and again, there's lots of different angles to come at for this, but the next step for those who have brought the awareness to it, they have the belief, the goal is set, the reticular activation system, etc., but they don't have something deeper that pushes them through. Is that the next level? Finding a really deep why, sitting in that belief, that positive affirmation until it turns the conscious thought and thinking to emotion somatically? Or is it a case of one step forward, one step back, trying out different things like you're putting on different pairs of shoes to see what fits? What would be the next step for that place? I know a Pandora's box of a question, so feel free to take it in any direction you like.
No, that was a really cool share and a great question. So there are two parts, and this is what I find to be the absolute most efficient. So one part of it is sort of tying to your why. I always think of like you can think of a maze. Like let's say you go into a cornfield and there's a maze, and like your goal is to get from point A to point B, to get from like going in the maze to the other side of the maze. But you have all these walls that are there. And you can think of like your why, which we'll actually talk about how to drive that even deeper at a subconscious level afterwards, because there's actually things that you can do at a subconscious level to engage more emotion and get your why deeper. And it has to do with your needs. And we'll come back to that. But the first thing is like, you can think of your why as being what's going to make you run faster through the maze. But then you still have all these walls that are gonna get in the way, but you can think of the walls as being the limiting beliefs, and if we can actually rewire and get those limiting beliefs out, it's like, "Oh, there's not even a maze, you just, like, run right through to the point that you're trying to get to." So that's the part I always like to start with first, because there's no point in running faster if you're still gonna get stuck. So the first thing is we have to get those limiting beliefs out of the way, and so once you've sourced your limiting beliefs, so I love that example. It's like, "Oh, then I'm gonna lose the thing that is my outlet, and then I'm gonna, struggle even more." So the first thing is once somebody's sourced their belief, you want to actually question it and challenge it. And there's three steps that we're going to use. This is actually one of like my favorite tools to use just for starting like your rewiring of your subconscious mind. There's three steps that we're going to use. So the first step is to find your core belief and its opposite. So let's just like as a really simple example, somebody says I want to start a business, but then they say, "No, I'm not good enough. I'm not capable. It's not for me. It's too difficult." So this rootedness in I'm not good enough. So the first thing is to find the opposite of your belief, which is pretty easy. Easy step. I am good enough, right? If it's I'm going to be abandoned, I'll have connection. I am lovable, I'm unlovable, I'm lovable. I'm unworthy, I'm worthy. Like pretty simple in terms of step 1. I'm trapped, I'm free. So we have step 1. Find the belief in its opposite. Step 2 is that we need, because the subconscious speaks in emotions and images, and by the way, the subconscious is the one hosting the belief, okay? Nobody's consciously waking up and being like, "Today I'm going to tell myself I'm not good enough all day and see how I feel." Like nobody's consciously choosing that. So step 2 is we have to actually find 10 pieces of evidence that that support the new idea. So if it's I'm not good enough, I'm good enough, 10 pieces of evidence that I'm good enough. Now the reason we use evidence is because evidence is a container for emotions and images. So for example, if I say, tell me, evidence that you do have connection in your life, you're worthy of connection, and you see somebody tell their like favorite high school memories where they're retelling old stories. Well, what do? They laugh, they smile, they tell old stories, their body language changes, and it's because every old story or piece of evidence actually is like a warehouse for emotion. It has emotion contained within it. And then when we tell old stories or memories or evidence, I'm going to use those things interchangeably, then you see the images of it. So if you think of, oh, that favorite childhood memory, you're playing on the playground, you see the red slide. Your favorite high school memory, oh, you're laughing with your friends, you see where you're standing. And so we use evidence to support the new idea. So we go, okay, 10 pieces of evidence I am good enough. Now, they do not have to be big pieces of evidence. They can be tiny. We just need things that are actually going to support that new idea. So it can be like, okay, I am good enough because I got out of bed at my first alarm, or I've been a really good friend lately, or I'm showing up better as a parent or a spouse or a partner. And so we want to just have these really specific things. And now what we're doing once we get 10 of them is we have step 1, the old idea versus the new one. I'm not good enough. I am good enough. Step 2, we have 10 pieces of emotions and images that are now getting fed down to our subconscious mind. So our subconscious mind can read them and take them in because the language of the subconscious is emotion and imagery. And then we have to look at step 3, which is that the subconscious mind doesn't change immediately. It usually takes about 21 days to build strong enough neural pathways that they're likely to stick. So, you've heard probably like, oh, it takes 21 days to create a new habit. That's why. That comes from neuroscience. And we've also seen, you'll be good at this because, or your audience will know, like muscles, right? Like when you work out a bicep muscle, it's repetition and you're using it and it actually, assists the growth of the muscle. Neural pathways are exactly like muscles. They atrophy over time when you're not using them. So if you stop telling the old story, I'm not good enough, and instead through repetition and emotion, you're firing and wiring in this new narrative with your evidence, with your emotions, your images that I am good enough. Well, all of a sudden you're starting to build your own neural networks in your brain. And so what we do is this works best, and this brings me to step number 3, when we are in a suggestible state. So summarize and we go step 1, I am not good enough, I am good enough. Step 2, 10 pieces of evidence or memories where I was good enough. That gives us the emotions, the images. Step 3, I record myself saying them into my phone. And in the morning when I wake up is usually when I'm most suggestible. Our brain is producing most alpha brainwaves. Our subconscious mind sponges up the most information in the first hour we wake up and the last hour before we go to bed. And so in that window of time, we want to listen back to this evidence and we want to feel about it and visualize it as much as we can. And now what we've done is we're like, okay, here's my goal. Here are the blocks. And I've got the opposite of the block. I'm feeding my subconscious mind the new idea. I'm listening when I'm in a suggestible state. And if we do this for 21 days, we're actually completely rewiring that belief at a subconscious level.
Makes so much sense. Again, such beautifully worded in terms of the practical advice for people, because everyone listening has their own version of this block. And anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's normally the thing that you're like, I wish I could do that. I had them with marathon running, I had them with competing in bodybuilding shows. My language was always, that's something other people do. Starting a business, my safety language that protected my ego temporarily was, that's something other people do. And it took the responsibility away from me, took the ownership away from me, put it onto this external thing away from me, so that I felt a little bit better about myself, the fact that I didn't think I could do these things, as opposed to, well, actually I would love to do that. It's the cognitive dissonance, the sour grapes, the Aesop's fable of like, oh, I really wish I could do that. Actually, no, I don't really want that. When in truth, your soul is calling you towards this person, this job, this thing. I want to ask, which is a bit of a left field question, but it ties into what you're talking about there. And this is kind of for me in real time now. And it was something that I came across. I can't remember, was it on a podcast or reading it through a book, but I, as you know, because we've had conversations on your podcast, on my podcast, I've been through your course. I'm a massive fan of your work, and I do a lot of personal development. I do a lot of different healing modalities. From your experience, when it comes to the subconscious mind, and if we use healing as the underlying phrase or tone, i.e., we've removed the blocks, we're now going towards our programming in the right direction, towards the relationship, towards the fitness goal, towards the health, towards the business, etc. Is there an area where it becomes too much? The language I've used, which isn't the correct language, but I'll share it with you, is too healed, where it feels like I'm doing all the work and I'm constantly doing the work. I'm getting stuck in the being versus the doing, and then I end up over analyzing my patterns. So I'll use your course's real time example. Ironically, the course also fixed the same problem that I was going through. Was when I was able to label as fearful avoidant, I felt so seen and heard with that label diagnosis of where I was at with my attachment style. But what happened to me was I started to stew in that. And now that I've got the language to describe what I'm like, oh, I'm a fearful avoidant in relationships, this explains everything. I found that I could overanalyze it, and that sometimes held me back from taking action. Ironically, as I went through, and again, I've had the benefit of having came through the course and rewiring and that subconscious mind. But for those who are listening, who will follow your work off the back of this, who are followed from the first podcast, they get this awareness with attachment style, with limiting belief, with a block, and then they can overanalyze it to the point where they've created more blocks, more figurative walls in that maze than there once was before they even had the awareness around it. Is that something that can happen? And if so, how do you recommend people move out of that overanalyzation so that they don't end up creating more stories, more blocks for themselves in the process of healing or quote unquote fixing themselves to remove them? If that question makes sense.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that's the challenge with labeling anything is that at the beginning we can come to identify with it. Like the ego mind loves to identify with things. And we want to watch out for that along the way because there's part of why we like to identify with things as human beings is because there's a sense of certainty in it. And so it's like, oh, it gives me my certainty needs and, things like that. But honestly, if anybody is in a place where they're feeling like by finding something out about themselves that they're starting to feel more blocked by it, it's honestly a symptom of that they just haven't finished the work yet or done the work around it yet. So you can think of it as like, hey, be on the lookout. Like, if you're in a place where you're like, okay, I learned that I'm fearful avoidant, or I learned that this is my limiting belief. And maybe they found, just in this conversation so far, they're like, oh my gosh, I have an unworthiness core belief. Well, if then every time something comes up and you're like, "Oh, it's because 'cause I'm unworthy." It's like, "Wait, you missed the whole point." Like, you have to actually be doing the rewiring work, and I'm such a big believer that it is always more work not to do the work. Like it's sometimes we get hesitant to do the work. We're like, "Well, what if it's hard, or what if I do it wrong?" Or we have these fears that come up, and it's like, honestly, nothing's gonna be worse than carrying the belief itself or identifying with the label itself. Like, the label of something is there to just help you understand at a deeper level and then know what it is that you have to rewire and reprogram. And so that's why I think it's so important when anything is happening that we have to look at things at the subconscious level. Because if we just look at things consciously, that's the labeling again, right? And it's like, okay, I analytically understand it. Okay, I'm intellectualizing it, but unless we're doing the subconscious work, then it's like, okay, you're just intellectualize, you got information. The ego mind loves information. It loves to identify with things, but actually it's like the subconscious rewiring that gets us out of that ego mind trap.
Thais, will you explore not doing the work is worse than doing the work?
Yes. So so for anybody, and so I don't know if I ever told you this in the first podcast, but my attachment style was fearful avoidant, right? So that was me, and I had all the core wounds, and it's part of why I got so into this work to begin with is like I had so much deep inner work to do there. And there were days on my own journey because I had a lot of like different core wounds to rewire, and we'll talk about some other, there's some other cool tools too. We can do exposure work to drive up action quicker so that we're less likely to not take action. There's other cool things that you can do, but I had points where it's like, oh gosh, like there's, sometimes it's confronting to do the work. Sometimes we like see deeply into ourselves and we're like, oh my gosh, I just realized where this came from in the past, and it brings up some old stuff, and so there can be that element of like a challenge, or it can be difficult at times. But whenever we look at, and I would always get people to do this, like, hey, just look at the cost of not taking action. It's actually another reprogramming tool. But you look at the cost of like, hey, if I don't change this thing, so whether it's a limiting belief or your attachment style or your patterns in a relationship, whatever it might be, if I don't change them, what does that actually cost me? And write out the cost. What does it look like? What does my life look like in a year if I didn't change? In 5 years, in 10 years, at the end of my life if I didn't change? What does my life actually look like? And then what would the benefits be if I just went through it right now? Just put the effort in, took action, did something about it. What would the benefits be? How would my life open up? And you can actually start looking at the benefits of the benefits. So you can start looking at like, yeah, well, if I heal my wound of unworthiness, let's say, then okay, I start feeling worthy, I can take up more space. Okay, then how does that benefit me? Well, then I can meet more people and make new friends and connect more and try new business things. And okay, well, then how does that benefit me? Well, then I generate more income. Then I'm, setting my family up for success in the long run financially. So it's like you can really start seeing clearly when you look at things through that lens. And it also is a great way to build a why and get a subconscious motivation. Truly, you'll always see if you actually weigh it out, it's always more painful to carry the same patterns that are limiting you than it is to actually move through them, even if it challenges you initially.
When you were going through your work, and you've seen this with hundreds of thousands, millions now at this point, but just particularly between courses and then the online content, because I'm going to link all of them in the description so people can follow on and find what's going to be the best for them. But if you use yourself as an example, or a common avatar of people coming through the course, following the page, etc., for those that get that, okay, no, I can't do this now. I can't do this today. The capacity is the word that I think of. I don't have the capacity for this today. I don't have the capacity for this week, this month, etc. What would you do historically to bring you back? Because there's been days when I would be deep in the work, and particularly the relationship stuff for me was, again, a lot of unworthiness, lack of self-love, insert stereotypical problems here. I had all of them. That was me. And it would manifest itself in that shutdown, no emotion, thinking that I was going to get the external relationship and that was going to validate me, and then when it didn't validate me, I moved on to the next person and hoping that would validate me, and then repeating the same patterns over and over again. And then when I would get days where I knew I was the problem and I needed to do the work, some days it felt like, yes, I'm in it today, and other days was really a struggle. How do you pull yourself, or how did you pull yourself back when the days felt like they were too much? Was it a case of one step back for two steps forward? Was it a case of disconnecting temporarily? Or was it a case of coming at it from a different angle? Or did it just vary depending on the day, the week, the month, etc.?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first thing is I would usually do that cost benefit work. Like, what are the costs of staying here and not doing much about it? And what are the benefits of making moves? And you can actually listen back to yourself saying that for 21 days. That really helps program in that motivation to take action, that inspiration deep down. But more than that, which I find to be a lot more effective, is, well, when we feel like we're stuck or we want to avoid, there's a secret need being met at a subconscious level. And so it's actually telling us something about ourselves. So for example, and like all just, like you said, you were fearful avoidant. I was fearful avoidant. We probably had a lot in common in how we used to cope with things. But let's just use like maybe you as an example if you're open to it. Maybe I picture you as you're describing yourself as somebody who kind of coped by like pushing yourself in a way, like constantly going through like, I'm gonna push myself harder at the gym. I'm gonna do these things. And then maybe you have these goals of like, okay, I'm going to do the fearful avoidant work, and it can be confronting and more challenging at times. And maybe there's this sort of tendency towards, I'm just going to push myself somewhere else. And that sometimes that resistance or that heaviness that we feel is actually because we have an unmet need for like basic human things. So a lot of times we as human beings, we have a need for comfort and security. And sometimes when we get so focused, and it's very typical of fearful avoidance, I really wrestled with this my whole life. When you're struggling with something, it's always just like you've always just learned to push harder, push your way through, white knuckle your way. And that's kind of like worked in a sense. But then you end up sabotaging eventually, or things just get so overwhelming because you can't do that forever. And so what I learned over the years is like, yeah, well, I also as a human being, like top needs for people a lot of times are for comfort sometimes. And if I was so starved of comfort because I was always pushing myself, then eventually things become really heavy and resistant. And it's not, resistance isn't coming from nowhere. Resistance is your subconscious mind giving you feedback that, hey, you need to actually like chill for a second and have some comfort. And so what I learned to do is I learned like, okay, when I'm sabotaging or in resistance, it's usually because there's a subconscious need being met. So I learned to be like, okay, by resisting or sabotaging something or procrastinating something, what am I being pulled towards instead? And how can I meet that need in the most in depth way possible, the deepest way possible? Because when you do, your subconscious then gets over it faster. So, for example, people can get comfort met through like binge watching television or binge playing video games. And like you see people playing video games, it's not really comfortable. Like they're usually all dysregulated anyways. So I learned like, okay, instead of getting comfort met through like, watching a TV show or whatever it is, it was just like ended up just being procrastination. I realized, well, why don't I just like get the comfort need met regularly in the healthiest way, which became through regulating my nervous system. And so when I could meditate in the morning and evening and feel really that sense of like being in parasympathetic nervous system mode, getting that comfort that way, then what I found as well is that it met the need for comfort in the best way possible. Now, this happens for everybody in all different forms. So you can see, for example, that somebody can be trying to like start a business and work on a task, but then they're like on social media, on their phone, texting with people. Well, then in that case, if you're procrastinating or like I joke with people, it's like you're cheating on your goal. If you're like cheating on your goal with social media or you're cheating on your goal with like, television, whatever it is. Well, if you're on social media, what need does it meet? Oh, maybe you're looking for like connection. And so maybe your connection bucket's a little empty. Go meet connection in a healthier way. Have a meaningful phone conversation for half an hour with a friend, or have a good catch up with somebody on the weekend. And usually when our buckets are filled in these particular areas where we have deep personal needs, then we are a lot more resistance free when it comes to focusing on our goals. And so that's actually a big part of like how we build our why as well, as we find our own subconscious needs and we try to tie our goals into those things as much as possible.
I can use myself as an example, but I don't want to, but I may if we have to. Something I want to ask is how much of it is proactive and how much of it is reactive in terms of setting up that nervous system regulation. Because when you're speaking there, the two things that came to mind were the secret needs being met. So I use myself as an example in the past of relationships, romantic relationships, and what I didn't understand. Actually, before I came across your work, this was a big eye opener for me when I came across your work first, was that I was seeking out what was familiar versus what was good for me and what I wanted. Big disconnect there that I was blindly ignorant to. And when I started to realize that, oh, this is familiar, I'm attaching or attracting people who are emotionally disconnected because that's what's very familiar for me. I was able to break that pattern, coming back to the awareness. But the secret needs being met, and people have but listening to the podcast, food is a big one, working out is a big one, social media is a big one, and then for a smaller portion, probably porn. And again, a lot of it comes down to connection. That they're porn is fake connection, McDonald's is fake nourishment. That we're seeking out something, but we're not getting the need met. With those who know that I'm looking for, let's say, connection. Connection is the thing I'm looking for. And if I don't feel connection, I go to social media, I go to porn, I go to the gym, I work out, I push myself, I go to work, etc. How much of that is proactively looking after themselves with their meditation, their nervous system regulation, their sleep, their nutrition, their movement, etc., and how much of it is reactive, i.e., I've become dysregulated because something has happened. I now need to vagus nerve breathe, or I need to journal, or I need to meditate. What's the split in terms of, obviously the ideal split is always going to be proactive, but what do you see most common? And this is an obvious question as a fitness person, how much does the proactive element support it when something does happen that makes you become dysregulated, just for people that are listening?
Okay, so this is like a great topic of conversation. This opens up a big can of worms though. So we'll let's go down the rabbit hole here for a second. So obviously, high level answer, like do the proactive stuff. So and I actually say like nervous system regulation on a daily basis is just huge anyway. So like have a morning and evening routine to regulate your nervous system is just massive. It goes a long way for many different reasons. However, what you're talking about is such an interesting conversation. It's one of my favorite things to discuss with people. So, you know how earlier we talked about the maze and we said like the limiting beliefs are the blocks, but then you can run faster. So the running faster is the needs. And I remember we had an initial needs discussion, but like when people can find their personal needs at a subconscious level, and we can even talk about how to get there, then what you ideally want to do is link all of your goals to these needs. So I'm going to give two examples. It's going to be a little bit lengthy, but it'll paint everything out. So I had this client years ago when I was running a private practice first, and she came in and I'm not in the fitness space. I was in the like, psychological space, but she came in and she said, "Hey, I'm pre-diabetic. I'm really struggling with my health and my well-being, and I can't seem to actually go to the gym or eat healthy or do any of these things. Can you help me?" So what we did is we started with number one. We looked at her limiting beliefs. She had all these limiting beliefs that she'd be judged and shamed and she's unworthy and all these things. So we rewired them. And then we got into like, well, what are her big needs? And her big needs as a person, and I think we might have had this original conversation a couple years back, but her big needs were like social connection, emotional connection, family, comfort, security. And so the idea to her, her conscious mind says, go to the gym, eat healthy, change your habits. Her subconscious is like, no, that's uncomfortable. It feels unsafe and out of my comfort zone. And it takes time away from family and social connection. And so what we did is we got her to link her goal instead to her subconscious needs. So we got her to be like, go to the gym with friends, join spinning classes with her friendship group. She started taking nature walks with her husband. She joined a hiking club in her neighborhood. She took her kids to the park on weekends. So now all these things like family, connection, instead of them being separate from her goals, she's tied them together. And then for comfort and security, we got her to like learn to lift weights at home. She did these like home workout classes online so that she felt comfortable and safe going into the gym later and knew what to do. And so what you're doing is you're actually linking your conscious mind's goals to your subconscious needs. And one of the best things we can do as people is not just rewire our limiting beliefs, but learn our own subconscious needs, because when we do, you can think of them as buckets that need to be filled all the time. And when we fill them proactively, we then don't rely on the reactive habits like porn, like junk food. And so what's crazy, and this brings me to that second part of it, is that everything that you do that's a bad habit is trying to meet good needs. It's just that you haven't done it proactively, so you end up in the reactive form. So it's actually telling you something. So if you look at junk food, well, our first experience is wired into our subconscious mind of food as children are being breastfed by our mothers. So you're being held, you're being cradled. When a mother is breastfeeding with a child, there's a tremendous amount of oxytocin, the bonding neurochemical. So all of us, our deepest subconscious and even unconscious associations to food are connection, safety, comfort. That's why people, when they're eating junk food, they're usually just starving for connection, safety, and comfort first. And that's why they've got a dysregulated nervous system. They feel lonely, so they go to food. If you look at pornography, it's such an interesting one. So a lot of people who go to porn, and you can see this, it's wild when you start seeing these things linked together. It's so interesting. So what do you have? You have people who are usually yearning for connection, not getting it. There's also people, and I've had so many conversations over the years with people about porn, It's usually novelty, a need for novelty, a need for connection, a need for control and how they have an experience, and then limiting beliefs that are keeping them afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of opening up. And so what happens is porn becomes a way, if you think of the maze again, porn becomes a way to get connection, novelty, control over your own experience of something in a way that doesn't have to make you face your limiting beliefs of like opening up, being vulnerable, all these different things. And so your subconscious mind all the time is basically trying to navigate your life by getting your needs met while avoiding the beliefs. It's trying to get through the maze. And so what ends up happening is if you don't realize you have these limiting beliefs that are blocking you from getting your needs met in a healthier way, then we rely on more unhealthy habits because it's just our subconscious mind doing whatever it can to get those needs.
Ooh, that that was wow. Okay, a few things to unpack there because that we connected in real time. Again, as most of your work tends to do, Thais. I don't want to put a false consensus bias on this and assume that my thinking is the same as everyone else, but something that, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can agree that a lot of people have very similar core wounds, or the core wounds are similar as opposed to people have similar core wounds. The core wounds, the stories are very, very similar. People connect with different ones, but they repeat themselves in different ways. Is how to meet your personal needs like that, where there's similar ones we all go to, or are they vastly different?
Yes, there's very similar ones that we all go to. There's like kind of your 20 most common ones, and those are things like achievement, career growth, emotional connection, social connection, family comfort, security. Like you'll hear a lot of these types of things, and people will recognize themselves in them. Novelty, exploration, adventure. They have actually all relate back down to our six basic human needs. So a lot of them will be around growth, novelty, certainty, or comfort. These obvious things, love and connection. You can see a lot of things spring off from there, right? And then you have the sense of contribution, significance. So you can think of those as being the biggest bodies of water. And we all have these different strategies that we use to get those met. So like for some people, their way to get love and connection is family. For other people, it's friendships. For other people, it's social connection or emotional connection. So you'll see that those tend to be the needs that we're all driven for.
Out of curiosity, something that I've said in the past on the podcast, but my own anecdotal personal experience is when I do big physical challenges. So when I ran through the Sahara, 6 marathons, I ran through the Arctic. I brought a group up Kilimanjaro in Africa. I'm bringing a group to Everest Base Camp next year. But something I've given advice to those individuals who wanted to follow similar goals is my life needs to be very stable everywhere else during those windows and periods of time, because the certainty of everything else means I can explore the novelty of this extreme thing over here. As soon as there's something that disrupts everyday life, that goes out the window. I've had some terrible experiences where I've tried to force my way through to a race or event or a challenge when life was disrupted, and it was just figurative or metaphorical, all hell breaking loose and everything falling apart. With the balance of personal needs being met, where is let me rephrase the question. Is there a check-in that you get people to consider so that because I would imagine if we're picturing them as buckets and personal needs, it's not going to be the same level of emotional connection you need at all times. Sometimes you're going to be in everyday life and you're going to feel you're in a relationship, maybe you're married, you have a great spouse, you feel super loved, you've got your kids, etc. So that bucket is kind of full, meaning that there's another area that needs a little bit more work. What's the check-in process for figuring out which bucket I need to fill up or which one I need to prioritize right now to get the most potential benefit?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I love what you said too, by the way, that when you're because you nailed that, right? Like when you have these extremes in one area, they need to be compensated for by other areas. So like you said, like those really extreme challenges, everything else has to be pretty status quo. And you actually see people naturally build out their lives that way. If you don't do that intentionally, it happens to you unintentionally too. So you'll see that like if somebody is in a place where they're kind of an extremist personality and they are always pushing themselves, like usually they if they aren't doing it on purpose, they start like retreating in other areas of life to get comfort and safety because they're overwhelmed, right? So you see these sort of natural things our mind does. But what I actually get people to do is because we have those six basic needs, but it's all wired according to conditioning. So this is like a really in-depth topic. We do a whole course like just on this. It's like 3 hours long, but you basically have to sort of simplify it. We have those six basic needs. And then we all have our own conditioned strategies that have been most beneficial for us to get our needs met. So, for example, somebody who's dismissive avoidant and attachment style, somebody who had a lot of like neglect growing up, they're the most strong avoidant attachment style for people who are not familiar. they usually like don't have as big of a priority around love and connection because they kind of had some rejection there, some neglect there. So they see connection as, yeah, like something we're wired for. It's important, but it's just sort of down the totem pole. And they'll usually use things to get that need met more indirectly. Like they sometimes like social connection or community rather than like romantic relationships, family, things that are more intimate and deeply connecting. So we have these sort of strategies we've developed to get our needs met. And we all have those 6 basic needs, but we have an order of them that's individual based on our own conditioning. So you'll also see, for example, by comparison, like somebody who's anxiously attached, they usually love and connection. It's their biggest priority all the time, right? So that's the top of the totem pole. And so you'll see based on different personalities and they're conditioned, basically it's by positive versus negative emotional association. So if you have really positive experiences with something, it's up the totem pole. If you have kind of less positive experiences, it's at the bottom of the totem pole. And that's what actually wires our conditioning. So we all have specific needs according to ourselves and our experiences. And there's some major ones. And what I get people to do is actually do like an assessment and questionnaire. And I'll actually go through some of the questions here for a second. But when you start getting the clarity of like, oh, these are the things I'm always prioritizing, then I get people to show up with healthy habits to meet them proactively. Because then what we do is we have our buckets filled and saturated, just like you were saying, like if we have the love and connection and we have family and kids and you're good there, then you focus on other things. What I like to think of it as is like if you know your needs deeply as a person and you have strategies and habits to intentionally meet them every day, every week, like you're clear and they're top of mind, actually what you'll see is we feel most fulfilled, most productive, we procrastinate the least because when you are out living out of alignment with your needs, they're like your GPS coordinates. They're always trying to pull you back towards them. So you might say, okay, go start a business. But if your biggest needs are around like family and romantic relationships, then like every time you go to start working, you distract yourself. You call your spouse, you check in with your kids. And so we need to have these really proactive habits of these buckets being filled because when we do, then we can actually focus more on the things that are outside of our buckets or the conscious mind goals that we have. So some of the major questions for people are like, and it's a long topic of conversation, so I'm trying to keep it like sort of streamlined here, but
I will link the course for people below so they can go deeper on this as well if you want to give us a synopsis, but there will be a way to go deeper for those that need it.
yeah, thank you. And forgive me if it's like, I'm fire hosing information and trying to keep it short, but you see your needs, your actual subconscious needs, and what you're already doing. So it's not the things you say you want to do. It's not, oh, I want to make more money. It's if you had a need around wealth building, and that's linking back usually to security or growth as a basic need, but it's one of our personality needs is what we call them. These things that we're subconsciously constantly driven for. You're gonna if somebody's not already like generating a passive stream of income, reading wealth building books, doing something about it, then it's just a conscious mind desire. So when you're answering the questions I'm going to go through, you're looking at what you're already doing. What you're already doing is your habits. Your subconscious mind is your habituated self. So it's how you find your subconscious habituated driver. So question number 1 is how do you spend your free time? And you're always spending your free time on what you actually are wired for the most. So if it's, social things, okay, it's probably a social need. If it's family things, okay, family need. If it's outside of work, you're constantly doing personal growth, then you're probably a big personal growth person. That's relating back to the basic need of growth, but it's personal growth is a personality need. So number 1, what are you spending your free time doing? And what you'll see is that if you imagine all of your free time is actually to get needs met. Everything we do all day long is to get a need met while avoiding a wound or a limiting belief. That's literally how we are functioning as human beings 24/7. So you'll start seeing, okay, what do I spend my time doing? And like, do you want to just share a couple examples if you feel comfortable? And I'll actually just show people how they can pluck out their needs from it.
Yeah, examples of what I do daily.
Yeah, in your free time. Yeah.
My free time is nearly always with my partner, my daughter, reading, or recovery between workouts. I do a lot of stretching, vibration rollers, massage guns. I do weekly deep tissue, dry needling. A lot of my free time is recovering between workouts and sessions or spending time with my mother, my sister, my father, my daughter, my partner. That is probably 80% or 90% of my free time because I consider fitness part of my work. So the actual training itself is part of work, so I don't necessarily consider that free time because it doubles over.
Okay, beautiful. So you can see, and you'll see what needs these meet. So like your recovery, what need does that meet for you? Is that like comfort or is that health?
Health, because fitness has always been, it was an unsupportive coping mechanism to a degree for a long period of life, and it was my only coping mechanism for a period of life and a season of life. So I have attached my mental health being good when I'm physically active and training, and focusing on my recovery allows me to hit very high level of intensity and quality within workouts, which give me that endorphins, which gives me that feel good feeling. So I've either conscious, probably subconsciously, but I know consciously now, I've tied those two things together. So my food, my sleep, my recovery is all feeding into better workouts, which feeds into better mental health.
Yeah, and, like, that's such a good example for people listening of how you've naturally tied your subconscious needs with your conscious goals. Like, it's just such a good example, and then it allows you to really perform. So you see health, so that's a big one, and then you said family, partner, daughter, parents. So what need does that mean? Is that family, or is that emotional connection, or is that both?
Both, both.
Good.
Yeah.
So you see family and you see emotional connection. I'm writing them down for you. So for people listening, you can see like how you spend your time and we're plucking out the needs. And then you said reading. So what do you read? I'm assuming personal growth
Yeah,
related things.
I read a lot of financial books. You mentioned them earlier. I read a lot of financial books. I have a vast different. It's mostly self help, personal development of some sort. I'm not a great fiction reader. I don't read for escape. I watch movies for escape. I generally read to improve my quality of life in some shape, way, or form.
Beautiful. Is that personal growth, achievement, wealth building, or all of the above?
All three. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So personal growth, wealth building, and it's so funny because I can hear, like, I notice it when people talk because I've obviously been doing this for a long time, but I could hear earlier when you were talking and sharing things, I was like, oh, you've got a huge achievement personality need. And that's a good thing, right? It can sometimes put you in overdrive too much and you have to learn to like take your foot off the gas, but you could hear it in the way you were describing things in the past. Okay, so then that's question number one. So question number two, we'll just do a couple of them, but just so people can start seeing how it works. So question number two is, what do you talk to other people about the most?
Oh, that's good. Normally, growth, heavily growth. So, business growth, relationship growth, making sure that we're happy, fulfilled. Conversations with my daughter, conversations with my partner are nearly always focused around laughter, growth, and again, a little bit of achievement is in there as well. That's a big thing for me. I had to rewire a lot of that because that was a driving force and probably predominant for large chunks of my life. And now I think I have a bit better balance between everything.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, once you rein in the achievement, so it's not driving you to burnout, or the teetering on burnout, then you actually achieve more, usually long term, which in turn
We were saying
fires
that
you.
right before we went online. We were saying that right before we went on the call. Yeah.
So you can hear again. So for your listeners, right, they can hear like, okay, and this is why you ask these questions. You'll start seeing the patterns, right? So you're like, okay, I talk to my family, my, humor, laughter, growth. So you actually start seeing these same needs start to overlap. Okay, and a lot of your spare time, it's like family, emotional connection, achievements. I'm assuming, and you said personal growth related things, so finances, personal growth. But then I'm assuming also that probably health, is health a part in there? Do you talk to people about health related things?
Yeah, generally a lot of mental health stuff, but yeah, fitness, health, that the whole side gets talked about a lot in conversation, but more so in recent years, psychological health, emotional health, because they're areas that I am naturally weaker in compared to the physical side.
Okay, beautiful. See, and that's what happens too is once we saturate certain needs, you start focusing on other ones, which is cool. It opens up more enrichment as a person because you're like, okay, I've got really good habits here. And then you start building and reinventing yourself in these other areas. It's really good. You're doing a good job of it. Okay. So you start seeing the same themes. And what people will see, I'll just ask one more so people can see it. But what each time you'll start to see these same types of themes. It's like achievement, personal growth, connection, family, wealth building. So you and health, right? So you'll see how you answered like the same things in both question one and two. Every person as you go through, there's seven major questions, but we'll just do one last one. You'll hear the same themes, and then it'll make really clear what your needs are. So in the third question, how do you spend your money?
It's interesting. I was actually having this conversation with my daughter yesterday. I invest probably 70% of it into either whether it's stocks, property, bonds, my investment portfolio, or reinvesting back into the business. I spend very little of my money, which is actually a detriment to a scarcity mindset that I've been spending years trying to unlearn and reprogram, because I still have fear around spending personal money for things. I would rather it sit there and grow, but again, that's subconscious programming. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe there's a limiting belief there that you would work on, but also people spend money according to their needs. So, like, I went on a big health kick. I used to never have a health need, and I really got a health need the past few years. And like, I spent a ton of money on supplements, right? So you'll see, and you'll see, like, we spend our money on those things. And because you are so growth oriented, like, so much of your growth, achievement, like, okay, what's happening when you're investing money? What are you doing? You're meeting the needs for growth and achievement, right? Which are clearly two of your biggest personality needs. And then I'm going to assume that the other things you probably spend money on probably follow the same patterns of, like, maybe you'd be more likely to spend money on, like, your family or loved ones than yourself.
Yeah, and healthy food.
And
I'm
healthy
actually
food.
I'm a big one on healthy food. I will spend money on trips. Yeah, you're right. And the courses and achievements. I actually bring people with me to most of the things I do. But historically, competitions, races, events, it was always me paying for them. So yeah, I just again process it in real time. Didn't mean to cut across, but I'm it's landing in real time.
And so you see how it's just you're spending money just according to your needs. So it's like
Mm.
you're spending money on the growth, the achievement, the wealth building, right? The investing. Even you said I'll invest it back into the business. What is that? Back to growth again, right? And or achievement. So you see all these themes, and sometimes people think like, oh, I should be spending more money on a fancy car or whatever it is. And it's like, well, that's just like society's programming. Like, you should be spending money on, hey, I know what my needs are as a person. This is what makes me feel the best, because your money at the end of the day is your units of energy. Like, you invest your actual personal calories and energy to go do things, to go make money, and then you get it in the form of a payment. And then it's like we end up using our energy that we spend on the things that we value the most, right? The biggest needs that we have. So people can go through and they can ask themselves, sort of like following suit with what we're doing, and start seeing the themes. Some other major questions are, what triggers you the most? The things that trigger you the most are usually things you want to protect the most or care about the most. It's what you spend your time on, your money on, what you talk to people about the most, where you light up in conversation. So if you've ever been kind of tired and then you have a conversation about personal growth or achievement, you like light up, you come back to life. It's a huge one. And then you'll see other major themes. And I don't want to like go too far into it, because I'll have to over explain some of the future questions, but the whole goal is to sit down and be like, okay, what are these themes coming out here for me? And another big one that I'll sort of leave people with on this topic is, what do you read, study, research the most? And you're always naturally studying, researching about the things that are most meaningful to you. And so you'll see, like, your time, your energy, your money, all these things are telling you your deep subconscious programs, your needs. And all day long, every day, we as human beings are literally trying to drive our lives to get our needs met. And if we don't have them met in healthy ways, like you're saying, we go to unhealthy forms. So then we go to the junk food. If somebody has a comfort need or emotional connection need, they're not getting it met because they're not vulnerable with people around them. Or if it's like porn, like we were talking about earlier, and somebody has a big need for control and novelty and connection, and they're not getting those met. Okay, well then they'll often use pornography. So it's funny, because once you actually know your needs, you can then, back to the original question that kicked this off, actually be like, hey, here are my personality needs, these things that I'm wired for deeply. I can actually connect my goals back to them, and it supercharges my goals. It helps me run way faster through the maze. Then I can rewire my limiting beliefs, get all the walls out of the way. Now I'm just sprinting to my goal, and it's easy. And then on top of that, I can have these buckets where I'm like, these are the things that I'm wired for that drive me. And when I meet them proactively, I'm so much more likely to go to unhealthy habits, because we go to unhealthy habits when we don't want to know what our needs are. So we're not meeting them. And so then our brain acts out of this like desperation, like, just give me the needs. And we go to unhealthier things.
I think that is where we will wrap it, Thais, because there's so much there. What an amazing podcast. Again, for the follow up, for those specifically, I'm going to link the podcast, the YouTube, the Instagram, the website. Everything's going to be in the show notes below. And again, this is just a small snippet of what you cover across your channels, across your courses, but just specifically for those who want to follow on from what you just said, what is the course they should check out? Because there's quite a few in terms of different ways that people can learn more and improve that personal development and awareness, etc. What's the name of the course in specific that you mentioned that went through that? Because I think there'll be a lot of people who will follow up directly to that from here.
Yeah, so it's the discover, embrace, and fulfill your subconscious needs. So it helps you like go through an assessment. It gives you the list of the most common needs too, so people can actually look at it and be like, oh, it's these. And then it helps you actually line up your goals and supercharge them that way. And so you'll get a really deep insight into your own subconscious programming.
And there's my follow up for people. Go check that out. As again, as somebody that's been through your courses, and we haven't even touched on that. That's a whole conversation for a different day. Like, I'm in a beautiful relationship now with an incredible person, and I put down, and I said this to her I was like, I did a course and I did a lot of work on myself and did a lot of things. The vibrational energy and frequency shifted. It shifted. You know, you've got the Instagram page with the Secured and Love group that people can join as well. So again, it's just about, this is where I want to go. Here are the blocks I want to remove. This is the awareness and how you get there. Here's how you remove the limiting beliefs in the maze. And again, I can speak firsthand as somebody who has done this with your work. So for those that are on the fence, need a tipping point, aren't sure, there's your call to action to go and do it. Thais, keep up the incredible work. Thank you so much again for the wonderful conversation. And yeah, just absolute brilliant and light bulb moments left, right, and center. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. I always love chatting with you and really blessed and honored to be here.
That was psychologist Thais Gibson, PhD, on unlocking your subconscious mind, removing blocks, and how finding your deep why is the real motivation for change. If you haven't listened to the first episode, I highly recommend you check that out. It's a little bit more on the relationship side and a little bit around the food in terms of food behavior and reprogramming unsupportive coping mechanisms and the healthy boundaries, but particularly focused around healing those old core wounds. That would be linked in the description below if you want to check it out. Today's podcast was brought to you by The Circle, which is my online group mastermind, my business coaching. If you are male or female and you are running a business and you are looking to move it to the next level, definitely check out the online mastermind, a group of other like-minded entrepreneurs. All my courses, my training videos, my coaches, the quarterly meetups and everything are all linked on that page below. You can check it out and see if it's a fit. That's everything from me from today's podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Catch you next week.